My Impact, Influence and Confidence programme is designed with talented women in mind to engage, inspire and build self-belief at work. For more information, go to bitfamous.co.uk. Hi, I'm Penny Haslam. Today in the podcast, boring training. What we're going to learn today is this and this. Sound good? Okay, let's get learning. No. So today it's about tackling boring training. No one likes boring training. Why? It's boring, okay? Even at primary school, right? You can all remember that teacher who was just a little bit boring. Or maybe a university lecturer who didn't set the world alight and you're like, oh God, this is so boring. I'm not interested. This is really hard to be interested in. And we don't want that. Life's too short for that. So I've come up with 5 things that I do in every single training that really lifts the room, energizes, and helps people skip out the door at the end of the day with a great feeling in their heart with some knowledge on board. Now, I know that I'm good at training because I've been told many times. So yes, I'm blowing my own trumpet. Fine. But it was really brought home to me actually. And I was so chuffed with this feedback. It was from a very large organisation's in-house L&D team. And they'd seen my training. I'd been brought in as an external trainer to help people be confident on camera. And they looked at my training and went, this is so radically different. How are you doing that? I was like, okay, I don't know what you mean. How do I do that? I just do my thing, and I make sure it's a good session. No, you do something else. You do some other things. What do you do? So I broke it down. I've got 5 things, 5 tips, 5 ways of really invigorating a training session. So tip number 1, I do this at the beginning of every session. I ask people what they came for. What do you hope to get out of this training today? What do you want to leave knowing or feeling or doing differently than you do right now? What have you come for? And this really helps focus people's minds on why they are there. It's a sort of self-motivating moment of, right, well, yeah, I can be selfish here and I can really think about what I want on my journey. What can I take from this? It's also quite light in that it's only just one thing. You haven't got to go, so what we're going to learn today is this and this. Sound good? Okay, let's get learning. No, it's like, oh, right, so you're motivated. You're right, what's in it for me? And that helps, people to lean into the learning, basically, which is really cool. And I write it on a flip chart or a whiteboard with a big marker pen, and I write out what their challenge is or what they want from the day. And if it's presentation skills, it'll be always something like, oh, I just want to feel less nervous, or I want to make sure what I'm saying is clear and coherent. Okay, so we write that down and I put their initials or their name next to it. And then we park it and we make sure that at the end of the day, we have achieved those things. And I'll check in on that list cheekily while they're doing something else and make sure we are actually on target for achieving that. Usually we are. 9.9 times out of 10, we are able to tick that off. I put a different coloured pen, a red pen, a line through it because we've slayed that challenge or we've met that query and dealt with it. Tick, tick, tick. Everyone loves ticking things off a list. So everyone goes away happy with that as well. They got what they came for. Tick. Number 2. And this was a key bit of what I was doing differently to the big L&D team. And that was I was telling stories. All the way through all of the training that we deliver, we make sure we tell stories. Stories are memorable and stories hook people in on an emotional level that you can't possibly achieve with just facts alone. And in fact, they're memorable because after hearing someone talk, 63% of people can remember a story, whereas just 5% can remember a statistic. So if you're just dealing in facts, figures, dry information, and you're not littering every hour with an anecdote, a moment of time, or a longer piece of storytelling, then you're going to fail when it comes to people remembering. So it helps embed the learning really, in a really fun way as well. So I make sure I have a story to go with every point I want to make. And I don't make too many points, and I'll get onto that in a minute in point 3. So stories are really great. In fact, I remember a story a teacher told me, and this is where it goes back to, isn't it? It's like, we don't want boring teachers. Mrs. Ellis, first year primary school, had us all sitting on the carpet, as you used to do in primary school, before the milk came or something like that, or the milk turned up, back in the 70s. So we're all sitting there in our flares and polyester penny collars. And Mrs. Ellis sits there and we're doing maths, right? But you wouldn't know it, because Mrs. Ellis started with a story. She said, you know what, at the weekend, and the minute a teacher says something about at the weekend, in my personal life, at my home, everyone's really keen, aren't they? The same's true today. When you're a grown-up trainer with grown-up people in front of you, we're all nosy and we all want to know what it's like in your life. So Mrs. Ellis hit the nail on the head there. And she said, at the weekend I had a little party and we were having 15 friends round for tea. So she made it very, very relatable as well. And now I had a problem because I needed to buy napkins, and I went to the shop on Saturday lunchtime and I found a packet of napkins that I was going to buy, and there were just 12 in the packet. But I had 15 friends round. So what did I do? So then you're into the maths and the learning. Honestly, it was so memorable. No one could work out what Mrs. Ellis did next. People are scratching their chins, putting their hands up, like, Mrs. Ellis, I know. 3 people went without napkins. No, that's not the right answer. Anyone else? I've got it. 3 people shared, 2 people shared, 3 people shared, something like that. And maths was coming out. You halved them with scissors. There was all sorts of creative problem solving. No, nobody got it right. Mrs. Ellis revealed it at the end. Well, children, I bought 2 packets of napkins and now I've got some spare. Everyone's like, oh yeah, is that it? Okay, fine, got it. But gosh, that is such a cool story, and I'm remembering it just a few years later, which is wonderful. So 2, tell stories. People will not forget you for that. Number 3, an insecure trainer, in my experience, and I have been an insecure trainer right at the beginning, 10 years ago when I first started training, will fill the room with their stuff all the time. There will be endless amounts of information. No minute will be left unturned without learning being imparted. Now, that's an insecurity to do with adding value. So you're at the front of the room, you're really desperate for your people in the room to understand everything about everything and learn, and that's what you're being paid for, and rightly so, and that's your job. But in my now decade-old experience of training, and especially through the lockdowns, through working on Zoom with people and training online, is that people relish more than anything the opportunity to talk to each other. It's so powerful. Now, if you can get them talking to each other and supporting each other and exchanging ideas, either in pairs or small groups or doing tabletop exercises, they will thank you for it rather than you standing at the front of the room and telling them stuff that they have to absorb. They will learn through that mechanism much more enjoyably and much more memorably, and will have a much better experience. So it takes quite a confident trainer to allow that space and air. I would say as much as 50% of your time needs to be thrown back into group work, teamwork, building ideas. For example, I could stand at the front of the room and go, right, negative self-talk when I'm doing my confidence and resilience training. As teams, we talk to ourselves, we begin to build negative phrases that we all fall back on. It's not great, we need to get out of the habit. What could those for negative phrases be? Put your hand up. And maybe 1 or 2 people will put their hand up like that. But if you actually get people in pairs or 3s and 4s, workshopping those ideas, oh yeah, bouncing off each other, then the noise in the room goes up, the energy increases, and people have lots more ideas than if it's just flatly asked of them. And they also really enjoy that. Breakout rooms, if you're doing it online, getting people into breakout rooms. And actually, it's a thing that I get asked a lot by people booking our training, is that will there be interactivity? And if there's not interactivity and they don't ask for that, I say, do you know what? I'm going to tell you now, there's going to be lots of interactivity between the delegates, because that's important. And they go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. So I'm going to build that time in. So I'm not lecturing. great. It goes down a storm. So educate yourself, educate your people on you wanting that. Ask anyone you're buying training from to do that, because you'll get loads of really good feedback for that. Point 4, listening. Now, this might just go into that whole, like, don't feel like you have to fill the airtime by talking all the time. Listening and noticing when people are talking, what the other people are doing and how they're responding. So this is about being empathetic, not pathetic, empathetic in the room. Intuitive, I think, is probably a skill here. And you get that from being able to listen actively. So listening to what they're saying, following up with a question if they haven't really elaborated. Why is that important to you? Or asking the room, does that resonate? People go, or no, or my experience is different. Anyone got a different experience? Asking questions and giving that time as well for discussion, because people need to feel heard. It's really valuable. It's a powerful thing. We know this. It's not always easy to achieve it when we're busy. So try and get that time. And you know what? You always get someone in a training room who goes on a bit too much, but you still have to listen to them, and then you can cut them short and make sure you don't return to them, maybe. But they're valuable because they get the room talking. So yeah, listen really well. And maybe you see someone nodding their head while someone else is talking, but they're not forthcoming. That doesn't mean to say you can't ask them and say, hey, Michael, I noticed you were nodding your head when Samir said this thing. I was actually, Penny, and the reason I was nodding my head is because I was thinking of a time when I da-da-da, which actually comes back round to one of the earlier points about stories. So if you tell your own stories in the room, it gives other people permission to tell their stories a little bit, which is what you can listen to and find out what people need and desire and what their challenges are. So that's good as well, listening. And then finally, this might be the nature of my training in that it is really practical, hands-on doing, but I do enjoy provoking a bit of challenge in the day and a bit of jeopardy for people. Now, really good example of that is when I run the Make Yourself a Little Bit Famous workshop. It's a practical day where people learn why they should raise their profile and then, crucially, how they might do it. So the afternoon is thrown over to practical getting on and doing it. And people have a choice of activity to have a go at, all of which is highly thrilling, nerves and adrenaline wise. They could speak at the front of the room for 5 minutes. They can take part in a panel discussion. They can make a short video on their phone. They can also make a podcast. So they get a good fun exercise to do. But the jeopardy, of course, is actually doing it and sharing it with people in front of the room. So we have showtime at 3:30, 4 o'clock. It's time to everyone to come back into the room, settle down, and we're going to hear from the speakers and we're going to watch the panel and we're going to have a laugh with the video creators and the podcasts and all the rest of it. And it is brilliant because everyone feels that sense of, oh my God, what's happening? How am I going to do? And they lean into it. A lot of people look a bit daunted by this, but they do it and they dig deep. And of course, it's a safe environment to have a go. And the smiles on the faces at the end, it's like, I did it. I achieved. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I didn't die. So I would say if you can, always inject an element of showing how to do this for everyone if you can, but one or two if you can't. Whatever level it is, always make sure there's some sort of moment where someone has to shine and step up a little bit. Obviously, not every subject lends itself to that. If you're doing, sort of training in financial compliance, that's harder. But anyway, I hope that has given you some food for thought about how to look out for trainers who were going to elevate the learning and have people skipping out the room and have the feedback scores super high for what people have learned, and also have that enduring or lasting impact which goes beyond the day or the week or the month in which the training was delivered. It's a year later, people are still remembering it and using what they've learned. That's the key bit to it, really, isn't it? So yeah, goodbye boring training, that's all I can say. It's showtime. My third book is coming out in 2024. It's all about confidence at work and in life. And as you'd expect from me, there are lots of stories and ideas to help you build confidence, whether it's for yourself or for others. It might be colleagues, teammates, friends and family. Head to pennyhaslam.co.uk/confidence-book.